Hi, my name is Karl Soule. I focus on film and television workflows here at Adobe, and today we're going to be talking about color management in Premiere. We're going to specifically focus on color management as it applies to the new color mode. Color management is the idea of making sure that as you're working with footage from different cameras, different sources, that color is something that it looks good right out of the gate, and it gives you a good starting point to begin to play and experiment in color mode in adjusting and grading your footage. Now, color management actually starts in the Edit tab, and right now I'm actually in the Color tab inside of Premiere, but if you do need to check on anything while you're in the color mode, just go to your workspaces, which are now found underneath the mode that you're working in, and go ahead and choose Analysis. This is going to bring up a panel called Color Management, and this is your one-stop shop for checking on all of your settings inside of Adobe Premiere. It's broken down by preferences, and in preferences, we want to make sure display color management is enabled. If you come down to your project, automatically color managing detected log and raw media is part of making this work well. This is also where you can set up your viewer gamma. So if your primary delivery format is the web, go ahead and shift viewer gamma to 2.2. Otherwise, leave it at 2.4 if your final delivery is for typical broadcast or you're delivering to streaming platforms like Netflix or Amazon. The other option here, turn on color space aware effects. You're going to want to have that on as well. So these are all sort of like the baseline to get color management turned on inside of Adobe Premiere. Now I'm going to switch over to the Edit tab, because in the Edit tab, this is the best place for making sure that you're starting with the correct color settings for your sequence. This is also the best place for modifying or adjusting how color is being handled with your footage. If you're not familiar with where and how to find these different settings, your project bin in edit mode is probably the best place if you need to quickly modify something. If your footage comes in looking log, that kind of milky, washed out look, probably Premiere didn't auto detect that particular format, or maybe the footage was transcoded and the metadata that Premiere relies on was lost in the transcode process. So it's important to know that when you first bring in your footage, it should have an appealing look to it to get started. Now, this particular project is actually made up of both Fuji and Arri footage, and I've put these different clips on a string out here. And if I take this clip and match frame it here, reveal this in the project, I'll see that this is actually in my Fuji footage here. So it's always a good idea to make sure that you know what footage came from where, so that if you do need to go and make these changes, usually you'll find this out early on. And the way that you actually go through and modify the footage on a clip is by right-clicking on it, going to Modify Color, and this is where the color settings are. This is where you can go in. You can see what Premiere is recognizing the footage as, and you can override that to get it to the correct space if you need to. This is also where you can go in and add a LUT file. For people, more advanced users, or people who have an established pipeline, they use certain types of technical log to 709 transform LUTs. This is the correct place to add your LUTs into your clips so that that transform is being used. Now, I'm going to cancel out of this for a second, and I'm actually going to do something here where I'm going to go ahead and blow this up full screen for a moment. I'm going to go ahead and select all of my footage, all of my Fuji footage, and I'm just going to turn this back to baseline here. I'm going to show you what this looked like when these particular clips came in. And we'll go ahead out. There's that milky log look that you're looking at here. You can see at this point, these clips don't have any color transform being applied to them. If you run into a situation like this, there's one of two possibilities. You might be working with transcoded media where in the transcode step, we lost the metadata to say that this is Fuji F-Log2. Or you might be working with a camera that maybe Premiere doesn't have the capability of auto-detecting yet. Maybe the metadata is not in the right spot for us yet. So in those circumstances, by selecting all of your camera footage, I can come in here and choose Modify Color. And you can see this is a one-step process for me to come in and say, okay, I want to override this. I want to change this so that all of these clips are Fuji F-Log2. And then I click OK, and now everything is correct. Now, the Premiere transforms, the things that are transforming the footage, they're not just simple LUTs, and in most cases, they're not just working in 709 space. They're dynamic. They're designed to work with your working color space. That doesn't make any sense to you if you've mostly just delivered and you're familiar with Rec 709. That's kind of the default for most production. That's standard dynamic range, and that's the color space that most folks are working with. The actual choice of what color space we're working in is dependent upon the sequence that we're working on. Now, this is something that can be found in the color management tab. I can come down here to my sequence and I can see these settings. Just so you're aware, it's available in a couple of places. It is under sequence settings, color management. This is also where you can see this. If you're a beginner, if you're just getting started and this color stuff is a little bit overwhelming, DirectRec 709 is a perfectly valid place to work. This is using the pipeline in Premiere that's been around for many, many years. You can grade on top of this. If your footage is already just 709 footage and you're bringing it in, this is a fine way to work. All your footage should be managed and look correctly, and then you can grade on top of this. If you are looking for something better, something that has more dynamic range to it, you can definitely switch this over into what is called the wide gamut mode. Now, wide gamut is essentially better math. It's a bigger playground so that instead of converting and sort of clamping your log footage, the big benefit of log footage is that you have, more detail in the shadows and the highlights. So as you kind of bring the exposure down or up, or you play with contrast, you get more pleasing results. There are built-in curves that kind of have a natural roll-off on the high end and on the shadows when you're working in wide gamut mode. You're still delivering to 709. It's just you're doing the math in a bigger playground, if you will. That's probably the best explanation I can give you. If none of that makes any sense, feel free to explore and check this out. Typically, you'll see the difference in the results, particularly if you have very bright sections of your video and very dark sections of your video. You'll see a more natural result working in wide gamut, and that is something to check out. If you're trying to achieve consistency with what you've had in Premiere before, feel free to use DirectRec 709. It's perfectly fine. The other thing about working in wide gamut mode is just know that there is an output color space. And this is where if you use wide gamut and you have to deliver to one of the high dynamic range formats like PQ or HLG, this is where you can actually set those different workspaces. We'll probably have some other videos at some point that talk more about high dynamic range workflows. I'm going to try and stick with 709 because I think that's what the majority of you are using here. But just know that wide gamut is fully prepared for the future, and color mode doesn't have any controls, adjustments that are limited to 709. They're all designed to work in 709 in wide gamut mode, and they're just ready for the future. That's one of the big benefits of color mode, is it's fully designed from the ground up to handle not only standard dynamic range, but high dynamic range moving forward. From here, I also want to give you a quick example of using a transform LUT. If for some reason, if the look of the footage using the Premiere transforms is not to your liking and you have a particular LUT from a camera maker that you'd prefer to use, this is also where you can do this. Modify color, And in this case, I'll go ahead and just use the media color space. And this input LUT option, this is where I can go through and I can grab a LUT from the drive on my system. Or in this case, I've downloaded a specific LUT for F-Log2 footage from the Fuji website. And I can go ahead and select that there. And I can click on this and I can see this. Sometimes, depending on how those LUTs are applied, they might have a bit of an artistic license. Premiere and the Adobe team has really worked with a wide range of different camera makers to make sure that our transforms are doing the math correctly. But sometimes you'll see, if you go to a website, you'll see that maybe there's like 4 or 5 different LUTs that the camera maker is providing. If there's one in particular that you'd prefer to use, this would be how you could apply that. And that LUT will be used in place of the transform that Premiere has built into it. Now, the goal of color management is to make sure that you never really have to look at that milky, washed out log footage. It's designed to be that great point for starting your grade and starting to really get the emotion and the intention of your footage through color. We never want you to have to look at log footage, but there are times maybe you want to check on what the footage looks like in log just to see if the highlights were protected, if the footage looks washed out in the highlights or shadows, due to just like an overexposure in the camera. If you ever have a need for doing that, there is actually a mode in the source monitor where you can turn on, go to monitor color management in the wrench menu. And from here, you can actually change this to show wide gamut source media as log. And by doing that, you'll actually be seeing what the log footage looks like without the transform applied to it. Now, let me turn that back over to be color managed, because I want to talk about one last thing, and that are the advanced settings. If you are an expert and you really want to dial in the exact math and the types of transforms that are happening, just know that in the color management tab, in the sequence area under advanced, and in the sequence clip area, there are some advanced controls that you can use to kind of tweak how the transform is working inside of Adobe Premiere on your footage. And you can actually do that on a clip-by-clip basis. These are not controls designed to allow for a lot of artistic leeway. That's what color mode is for. But if you are an advanced user and you really want to kind of dial in a particular clip and how the highlight fall off is happening, those types of things, you can actually go in to each individual clip and tweak the values of this just slightly. And that just make sure that you understand that this is sort of the starting point for grading, and all the grading is going to happen in color mode. That's kind of the way that we envision this working. Thank you so much for watching. That's just about everything. Have fun exploring color mode.